The Kawasaki is my second bike of choice. I love riding this bike. There's no doubt this is by far the funnest bike to ride. It's so nimble. The geometry on the bike is definitely there. You can move it around, perfect. You can throw it around. It goes wherever you want to take it. But there's times that if you were to go racing, I feel like it's maybe a little bit too nimble. Coming down the straightaways, with it being light, it kind of wants to bounce around a little bit more than you would like. Coming into the jumps, it works perfect. You can, throw good whips on it, there's no doubt. But I would say on your flat corners or, corners that are a little bit more hard pack, it wants to break away from you a lot. So you have to tend to slow down a little bit more as you're coming through those corners. As far as the sand track, if you're taking this bike on a sand track, it's definitely one of the funnest bikes you could ever ride, just because as it's trying to break away from you, with it being a little bit more nimble, it's easier to ride, it's easier to control it and maintain where it goes. As far as the suspension, I would say it's still a little bit pogly, like down in, it's a lot better than it was down in Mesquite, but I would still say that, the bike needs maybe just a little bit more weight on it to stabilize it. As far as the braking would go on this, I had some hard times coming in. I feel like the braking could be a little bit better. I feel like the front brake was not really there, so I tended to have to use a little bit more brake as you're coming in. As far as the motor package goes, there was a lot of bottom end on it, but as you're climbing up through the gears and into the RPMs, it kind of died out pretty quick, and it wasn't as powerful as some of the other bikes on the top end, and so therefore as you're coming into the bigger jumps, you'd have to force it a little bit more as you're coming over them. But all in all, again, one of the funnest bikes to ever ride, and if you're looking for a bike to just rip around on and probably better your skills technically, and this is an easy bike to learn on and get going in that direction.
So the Kawasaki KX250, this bike is by far my favorite as far as riding and fun. It feels light. On the sand track today, this probably would have been my favorite bike. You could just throw it into the turns. It was light, it was nimble. The motor's a strong motor. It's a lot of mid and top, pulls really well. As far as the seat height, it feels a little short to me. I'm a little bit taller, but it is one fun bike. The brakes were awesome. Honestly, I think they were, it's hard to say. It's probably second best brakes out of the group. The suspension is really good. The KYB suspension, the way it's set up, I really like that. This bike drifted good on the hard pack. In the sand, it was very stable. Front end wasn't twitchy at all. It tracks really well. So if you can pick one up, put a bunch of effort into it like Greg has, I think this would be a good choice. This is the funnest bike. That's about all I got, dude.
My beloved 2007 Kawasaki KX250 ultimately placed second place today in the shootout. On this bike, you feel like you sit into the bike the most compared to the other bikes. And me being 6'3", after getting off the other bikes, hopping back onto this bike, it felt the lowest. Like this bike actually felt the smallest to me. But what's good about this cockpit position is that when you go from that standing to sitting position, boom, like you are in that riding position and ready to take that turn, leg up, and you're ready to hit that rut corner, whatever it is. And that's what makes this bike so fun to ride. You can really lay it over in the corners. It doesn't have a problem doing that. It feels the most stable for me. So in some of the sandier conditions, I'm not as nervous on this bike compared to the other ones. I feel like this one is able to plow through the sand, and you're kind of just able to like ride the wave, so to speak, with it, and just kind of steer with the rear end. That's something that this bike does really well, is steer with the rear end. So you can kind of come into a corner, kind of give it the gas, and this rear end just wants to kind of slide right around, and it's a super fun feeling. The back end does feel stable for me over jumps. Didn't feel like it was kicking at all. and the front end held up tremendously. That's one thing I must say about these bikes compared to the Part 1 Shootout when the suspension was in their stock form, compared to after when Moto Experts installed Racetech Gold valves, springs, and valved them for the riders that we had here today. I wasn't clearing all of the jumps today, so I was coming up short on some of them, and I had no issues with the forks bottoming out like I did the first time around on these bikes. Definitely pleased. Like I said, I'm 6'3", 200 pounds, and these things held up perfectly for me, and I didn't have any issues. A couple clicker adjustments on the Yamaha and probably the Honda, and we would have been right on the money. In terms of the motor, I would say that it has the third best bottom end, but all you need to do is have your finger on the clutch, and I'm not even talking about, you just need the lightest feather of the clutch, and that bottom end just lights right up and gets right into that mid-range, which is a super strong hit. Does seem to sign off a little bit sooner than the other bikes, but if you're able to ride on that clutch just a little bit in that mid-range, man, it is a super fun bike to ride. In terms of the brakes, I mentioned it with the Yamaha. I felt like it was super similar to that bike. Wasn't as good as the Honda, but overall better than the Suzuki. Exactly like Chris and Hayden mentioned, this bike is just super fun. If you guys want to go out there and have a good time on your motorcycle, this is definitely the bike that you want to go choose. Now, I wouldn't choose it to go racing just because it does lack in that bottom end a little bit, but like I said, you feather the clutch, you're right on it. I'm just not that skilled of a rider in order to handle that bike in racing conditions. So overall, that's why I ended up choosing the Kawasaki KX250 second.
If you guys are interested in finding out how the other Japanese models compared to this Kawasaki KX250, I've got the full Shootout video on my channel along with the complete build series as well. But that's going to be a wrap for this video, guys. As always, ride hard, be safe, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace!